Welcome back to a new episode of What's Up, Prof. Hello, Walter.
Hi, Martin.
We're back again. How are you doing?
Yes, we're back.
So we continue a little bit on what we've done in the previous What's Up, Prof episodes.
Many of our programs develop as a consequence of circumstances. It seems as if there is a need and somehow one needs to address it because the issues are quite serious.
Yes, we cannot ignore what's happening and the questions that getting asked. So let's delve into this and ask the Lord's blessing again.
We certainly will need it.
Our Father in heaven, thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss important matters. We ask that you enlighten our minds with the Holy Spirit and that you bless this discussion, please. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Now, Martin, our title today is somewhat provocative, but it has a kink in the tail as well to try and make it less provocative. The title is How to Survive the Babylonians in Laodicea. Now, there are two aspects to this title. There is a Babylonian trend or thinking pattern that needs to be addressed. And we state in Laodicea.
Yes.
And that touches us all.
Exactly. It's not putting anybody above anybody else.
Correct. So Laodicea is a state in which the church is. And it is a message to each and every single one of us, lest we become puffed up and think that we are more important or whatever stature we want to assign to us or anyone else. Laodicea brings us back to earth.
Yeah, and it's also a state that you don't want to continue being in.
No, you don't want to be in that lukewarm state. Lukewarm is actually a major problem. And the Lord defines it. And he says, it's better to be cold or hot. But this lukewarm state is the worst of them all. And then we think, all right, we've made it. We are now part of those that understand whatever the plan of salvation is trying to tell us, where we are in the stream of time. And that does not make us the bee's knees. That means we have been admitted to intensive care.
That's a very good comparison.
Yes. So we're all in intensive care. And some of us come with baggage. And some of us pick up baggage along the way. And some of us, when we are schooled in the world, we pick up the ways of the world. It took Moses 40 years to get rid of the ways of the world before he was fitted and squared to become the leader of God's people. 40 years in the wilderness looking at sheep.
Totally different from what he was doing the first 40 years.
Yes, so let's not be too hard on anyone. And when we talk about Babylonians in Laodicea. Martin, there's an issue which is often neglected in the Word of God. And most denominations don't even touch on it. And that's the question of present truth. In 2 Peter chapter 1 verse 12 we read, "Wherefore I will not be negligent to put you always in remembrance of these things, though you know them, and be established in present truth."
That's a very good statement.
It's a magnificent statement, and it comes from the vociferous Peter. So there are two things that need to be addressed in this verse. The remembrance of things. So nothing in the scripture is unimportant.
No.
And we need to know it all. We need to be reminded all the time what it says and how God communicates with us. But then there is a special aspect which is especially important for a particular time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is called present truth.
And I like the wording before that. You have to be established
Yes.
in the present truth.
And you mustn't be negligent.
Yeah, if these things happen.
And how many times must you be remembered or reminded? Always. It's if you look at this verse and you mull over it, there's a lot of depth in it. So in the time that this was written, what was the present truth?
Well, at this stage, Jesus as the Messiah was the present truth.
That was the present truth. And did the people embrace it and rejoice?
The church, definitely not.
But there was a triumphant entry.
Mm-hmm.
So there were people that were singing and rejoicing, and it was just a matter of days, and the circumstances changed entirely.
Yeah. Okay. So they probably misunderstood the present truth,
Yes.
and they weren't established in it.
And they had a wrong concept of the present truth. They thought that now the Romans would be driven out, everything would go honky-dory as far as they were concerned. They were going to be on top of the pile.
Mm.
And exactly the opposite happened.
Yeah,
right?
if you pull that through to today, I think we've got a lot of people that's also misinterpreting present truth.
Yes. So present truth needs to be based on Scripture. And present truth never negates any portion of Scripture. Right? So present truth is very, very important. And present truth needs to be preached, and we need to be established as a people in present truth. If the disciples had not been established in present truth, would the gospel have made any inroads in the world?
No. And they weren't established in present truth before their conversion.
Exactly, and their conversion came after
Mm-hmm.
the crucifixion.
Mm.
So they didn't understand either. So how do you become established in present truth? You must be reminded of the stream of events, and you must have a special truth for this time. If you go to the book of Isaiah, we read here in Isaiah 48 from verse 2, "For they call themselves the holy city and stay themselves upon the God of Israel. The Lord of hosts is his name." He's talking to his people. And they think, we are the holy city. We are the chosen people of God. We are the ones that are in favor with God. We are Laodicea, if we put it into present form, right? So they had this puffed up notion that they were the bee's knees. And then he says to them, "I have declared the former things from the beginning, and they went forth out of my mouth, and I showed them. I did them suddenly, and they came to pass." So the Lord says, I put the prophetic word into my word, so that you would know that I am God, because all prophecy is being fulfilled according to my word. And in spite of it, why did I do that? Why did I make so sure that you can see that I really am who I say? Because I knew that thou art obstinate, and thy neck is an iron sinew, and thy brow brass. Stubborn people. I have even from the beginning declared it to thee. Before it came to pass, I showed it thee, lest thou shouldst say, Mine idol has done them, and mine graven image and my molten image has commanded them. Now the elevation of self is also an idol.
Yeah. Especially.
So if you think, well, why should I say thank you? I planted this food. Yeah, I bought it with my money at the supermarket. Why should I say thank you?
Yeah. Well, I think Cain had the same
Attitude. Who made it grow?
Mm-hmm.
Who designed the seed?
Exactly. Who gave life to that seed?
All right, so they were a stubborn and obstinate people, and they served as a type. Now, how stubborn were they by the time that Jesus came onto the scene? Well, here's the speech of Stephen. Acts 7:51, ye stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, ye do always resist the Holy Ghost, as your fathers did, so do ye. Martin, who's he talking to?
To the leaders in the church.
He's talking to the leaders of the church, the representatives even of the Sanhedrin. Which of the prophets have not your fathers persecuted? And they have slain them which showed before of the coming of the just one, of whom ye have now been the betrayers and the murderers, who have received the law by the disposition of angels and have not kept it. The condition at the time of Jesus. And this was the time when they were reminded that the present truth was that the Messiah was to come into the world. Had God made special provision to remind them of that?
Oh, yes.
Didn't he send the wise men? Didn't they knock at the doors in Jerusalem and say, hello, where's the prince? Where's the king? And didn't Herod get all excited and make them study the scriptures?
Exactly. So they were supposed to have known, but they had to go back to study the scriptures.
So they were stiff-necked and uncircumcised in heart and ears, and they wouldn't listen. They wouldn't listen. They didn't accept present truth. They rejected present truth. They thought they were established, but they rejected the present truth. Could the same happen to us?
Yes, you see, I think also the problem is they even knew prophecy, but they didn't put it to present truth. They didn't couple that together.
It's so important that we realize that present truth does not negate old truth. Did the fact that Jesus had come into the world and was the Messiah of the world negate any of the prophecies of the Old Testament?
No.
It fulfilled them.
It fulfilled and established it.
To the letter. Did they accept it?
No.
Are we in danger of doing perhaps the same thing?
I think so.
So in other words, can we say, Martin, that old truths are still truth? But old truths are not necessarily present truth, although they might be encapsulated in the old truth. So what is special about present truth? It's a special event, a special message for the time in which we are living. Okay. So let's ask ourselves, what was present truth for Moses?
Getting out of Egypt, the promise that was being kept by God, that he will save them out of Egypt.
Yes, that this people that God had promised that he would give them an inheritance. Now was the time for this event to take place. Now, interesting, Moses, before he became the leader of the Israelites, while he was still a prince in Egypt, did he realize that did he have a feeling that he had a calling to be the deliverer?
Yes. But he misinterpreted it, what that should be.
Yes, he thought it was going to be a military campaign, right? And he was going to do it. And he had all the training, and he had all the expertise, and he had been educated at the highest institutes of learning of the Egyptians. And when he saw those people fighting and arguing and treating the Israelites poorly, he whacked the one and buried him in the sand, right? And he had an idea that the time must be near. But 40 years, off you go, pal, into the wilderness to learn and to unlearn. So that's very interesting. So there was a present truth, and he understood it, but he misapplied it.
Yeah. He understood there is a present truth, but he didn't understand what it is.
Okay. What about Jeremiah? Did he understand that there was a present truth?
Yes. But he was also disheartened.
He was very disheartened. And the present truth at that time was the Babylonians are coming to destroy this place. And we are the people of God. This will never happen, was the attitude of the others. And so when he kept on saying it, what did they do to him?
They wanted to kill him.
Yes, and they treated him very nicely, right? No. And eventually he became so disheartened. But he was a fiery character. I can identify with Jeremiah. I want to sit on a rock one day and talk to Jeremiah for a long time. Because, they tore up his DVDs and threw them in the fire. And he said, well, let's make another couple of DVDs and add some more details and really irritate them. And it did, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's interesting. So there are some parallels. And then there's an etc. Of course, there were other prophets living at exactly the same time. Daniel was living in Babylon. Ezekiel was prophesying. Those are the major prophets, and they were preaching present truth.
Yep.
Was present truth popular?
No, unfortunately not at all. Not for the people of God, and not even for the people outside of Israel.
Exactly. All right, so we've established one thing now. Present truth has never been popular. Never. Present truth was not accepted by the majority. Present truth was even, to a large extent, rejected by those that should be preaching it.
Yeah.
Can we say that?
Mm-hmm.
So this is a pattern. Can we expect a repeat of the pattern?
There's nothing new under the sun.
There's nothing new under the sun. Martin, I think we're already getting into hot water here. All right, so that brings us to this very important question. What is present truth for our time?
The soon return, or the imminent return of Jesus.
Yes. And the three angels' messages, right? That's present truth for our time. It's a very popular message. Time of the judgment has come. Worship him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, the springs of water. Babylon is fallen. And a little bit louder, and she's become a house of demon and a house of every unclean and detestable bird. Come out of her, my people, that you receive not of her plagues. Do not accept the mark of the beast. Because if you accept the mark of the beast, the following will happen. Very popular message, right?
Just as popular as Jeremiah's was.
All right. Now, what happens if you're living in the midst of the Babylonians and you tell them, you're fallen, you've become a house of demons? The Babylonians will rejoice, right?
Mm-hmm. No, definitely not.
The Babylonians won't like that message. And some are not inclined to give that message, particularly if they have very close relations with the Babylonians. So the present truth in our time is no more popular than present truth was in days of old. Mm-hmm. You agree?
Yep.
Okay. So that brings us to the next question. Why are some leaders so hesitant to expose Babylon and the mark of the beast?
Well, I think you answered that in your previous sentence. They are probably a little bit too much affiliated with the Babylonians.
Or there's another possibility, not necessarily affiliation, but what about inebriation?
Okay, now I have to explain.
Inebriation is when you have imbibed in a spot of beverage that goes to your head. You've become drunk with the wine of Babylon. Is it possible to become inebriated with the wine of Babylon?
Yes, easily, because it's such a sweet tasting wine.
All right. Now, if you want to be popular in the world, then what message would you cling to? Present truth or compromise with Babylonian theology?
Well, if we want to stand, we have to embrace present truth and go against the Babylonians.
Okay, so could you expect conflict within the church?
Yes.
Are there people that think it is a good idea to get their education from Babylonian institutes?
Mm-hmm.
Are some institutes more Babylonian than others?
Yes.
I think so, right? So you have a sort of a smorgasbord. You have a choice. You can go to an ultra-Babylonian institute and receive your education, sometimes unknowingly and sometimes by choice. And you can go to a halfway one, and you can go to one that preaches everything including present truth. You have a choice, right? Now, is there a tendency, if you go through the history of Israel, for Babylon to make inroads even amongst God's people?
Continually. I don't think there was a time when Babylonian inroads was not in Israel.
Okay, so they were very inclined towards Baal worship. And sometimes they got so bad that they even started sacrificing their children to these deities, right? So Martin, if you look at Solomon, what was his problem?
Women.
All right. So women was his problem. He had an extraordinary affinity for women, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, women in a theological sense, what do they refer to?
Churches.
Churches. So do you think we might have modern day Solomons with an extraordinary affinity for women?
Yes.
Eh? And he loved them.
Mm-hmm.
And he interacted with them.
And he did all things to please them.
And he did he bring Moloch into the temple? Did he set up images?
Yeah.
Did he
build altars?
So he really appeased them, right? Do you think we might have similar things come into God's church?
Well, we started off speaking about Laodicea. And that's one of the attributes of that church.
And it's lukewarm.
Mm-hmm.
So that means, if things don't always go right, there's not necessarily a trumpet that says there's something seriously wrong here.
Rather keep quiet to keep the peace.
Now, if you go back to ancient Israel, did it sometimes become so bad that it became so blatantly apostate that it was absolutely necessary for God to intervene?
Definitely, quite a few times.
Quite a few times, right? And so we have this roller coaster throughout history. And we must expect a similar roller coaster within the church. Now, why are we talking about this issue? Why are we even mentioning this issue? Well, because, Martin, we have received many written letters. We have received many phone calls. And some people are at the point of despair. And I received a phone call just this morning on the issue, and a mail on this issue, where people are saying, we cannot handle the apostasy anymore in the church. It is so hard for us that it seems to us as if this church has become Babylon. And we cannot imagine hanging in there and further associating ourselves with it. And then they would ask me the question, how do you manage to hang in there with everything that has happened to you personally and to others as well? Why are you hanging in? Are you either you're insane, or you're blind, you can't see what's happening, or there must be some other recipe. Can you help us? So, Martin, that is why we had a little chat and said, how do we deal with this? Let's see what we can do about it. And the other question that always pops up is, why does God permit this? Right? Why doesn't he stop it if this is God's people? Why did he not intervene a long time ago? Question, did he intervene to prevent the crucifixion of Jesus?
No. It had to be done.
Did he intervene to prevent the murder and the martyrdom of the disciples? No. Did he intervene when they threw John into boiling oil and then banished him to Patmos when that didn't work out? No. So let's look at that aspect. This is the aspect of the long suffering and patience of God in the face of a stubborn and obstinate people. We read in Exodus 5:22, and Moses returned unto the Lord and said, Lord, wherefore hast thou so evil entreated this people? Why is it that thou hast sent me? For since I came to Pharaoh to speak in thy name, he has done evil to this people, neither hast thou delivered thy people at all. Do you think he's slightly peeved? I love these stories.
Yeah, it brings, you can resonate with it.
Yes, absolutely. Especially in the time we are living in, you can resonate. Why are you not doing anything? What's going on here? And God answers him eventually in Exodus 6 verse 1 and says, Then the Lord said unto Moses, Now shalt thou see what I will do to Pharaoh. For with a strong hand shall he let them go, and with a strong hand shall he drive them out of his land. So there comes a point when God says, enough, right? Sometimes it feels very long before that happens.
It is. And he didn't tell Moses, go on your own, there you go.
No.
He had to stay with the people.
They had to stay with the people. They had to go through this whole turmoil. Eventually they came out, and it didn't take them many hours before they started grumbling. And they had to learn how God works and the providence of God. And it took 40 years of wandering in the wilderness before their perfect offspring went into Canaan, right?
Yeah.
Again, the answer is? No. Nothing perfect. Nothing. So we will have this problem with us for a long time. Just think about poor old Jeremiah. He says, Righteous art thou, O Lord, when I plead with thee, yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Wherefore doth the way of the wicked prosper? Wherefore are all they happy that deal very treacherously? It's a good question, right? I don't understand, Lord. I've had enough of this nonsense. All of these people are prospering like green trees, and look at me, I'm miserable and I'm poorly treated, etc. Eventually he says in chapter 20 verse 8, For since I spake, I cried out. I cried violence and spoil, because the word of the Lord was made a reproach unto me and a derision daily. Then I said, I will not make mention of him, nor speak any more in his name. But his word was in mine heart as a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I was weary of forbearing, and I could not stay. He couldn't keep it in. He had to speak. And the more he spoke, the more in trouble he got. Right?
It sounds familiar.
It just sounds so familiar. Every time you open your mouth, you get a ton of bricks on you. And this is the way it is.
But who told him to speak?
God told him to speak.
So that's the main thing. You must burn through, because God is leading. All
right, so God told him to speak. But he also says that word was a fire in his heart. It was shut up in his bones. He had internalized present truth.
Exactly. He has established it.
He had established himself in present truth, and he was preaching present truth, and he was greeted with a ton of bricks. What can we expect?
Nothing less.
All right? So is the modern Sanhedrin going to come down on you like a ton of bricks?
Mm-hmm.
Can you expect anything else?
Yep.
All right. But now let's not be unkind.
Yeah.
Are there Nicodemuses in the modern Sanhedrin?
Mm-hmm. There will always be.
All right. Let's ask another question. Are there potential Pauls
Definitely.
in the modern Sanhedrin?
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yes.
Okay. So even though matters might look very dark, there might be light at the end of the tunnel, because you never know. Maybe that guy who's spitting fire at you and having you arrested and thrown in jail and beaten to a pulp might become the next evangelist.
Mm-hmm.
What happens then, right?
You always have to let God do the work.
Okay, so let's not judge anything before the time. Let's not take Paul apart, and let's not misinterpret Nicodemus.
That's the thing. We can condemn the action, but not the person.
That is the point. And even if we see the most liberal actions, remember Aaron, right?
Exactly.
Remember Aaron and his actions. So if we look at the leaders in the church and we make a comparison, John 3 verse 9, Nicodemus comes to Jesus, and Nicodemus answered and said unto him, how can these things be? Now Jesus told him that he has to be reborn. He has to get a new heart. He was the leader. He was in the Sanhedrin. He was in the GC. That's where he was, right? And here he comes, and Jesus tells him, sorry, but you've missed the boat. And he says, how can this be? And Jesus answered and said unto him, art thou a master or a teacher or a leader or one of those of Israel, and knowest not these things? Can it happen?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
And it takes a man to acknowledge that you don't know.
All right. Now, did he immediately pack up everything and follow Jesus?
No.
No. But the interesting thing is, he mulled it over, and he watched, and he studied. And when those rocks were rent, and that earthquake came, and that sky was darkened, and the sun didn't bring its light, his faith was forever established, whereas the faith of the disciples was totally destroyed.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Very. A good warning.
Yeah,
For present truth for us.
And those disciples had the privilege of sitting at Jesus' feet, eating his words on a daily basis. And Nicodemus' faith was established, and theirs was destroyed by the very same events. Yeah. So let's not be too harsh, but let's be pretty straight. William Tyndale, I like that man. God's rebel. That's what they called him, right? And he said to the papal legate, if God spare my life ere many years, I will cause a boy who drives a plow to know more of the scriptures than you do. He was talking to the religious leaders, right? So he was talking through this individual to the whole papal hierarchy and all the learned men of the time. Martin, let's be very bold now and ask, do you think there might be people that have studied the scripture that Tyndale provided and have internalized it and might know more about the plan of salvation and the working of the Holy Spirit and the meaning and the depth of the conversion that takes place than many a theologian in our church?
Yes, plowboys.
Plowboys. Do you think there might be plowboys that know more than the professors at some of our institutes?
I'm sure.
I'm absolutely convinced that it is the case. Now, what if the theologian should get the same attitude as the plowboy? That's what happened to Paul.
Yes. Then you will be of worth.
You will have such power. It will be unbelievable.
Again, you have to believe like a child, so it brings you back into that harmony.
All right. So we have all of these dynamics happening in the church. Psalms 37 verse 35 says, I've seen the wicked in great power and spreading himself like a green bay tree. Yet he passed away, and lo, he was not. Yea, I sought him, but he could not be found. In other words, we're looking at the wickedness, we're looking at the apostasy, we're looking at all of these things, and we think, how long, Sovereign Lord? How long will you permit these things in the church? And like Moses say, you've done nothing about this. And he's talking to God. And then there were no more.
Yeah.
There came a time Pharaoh was gone.
Time when God says, now you will see what I will do.
Okay. Now I think we've laid a little bit of groundwork for our discussion. And perhaps it's time for a little bit of personal reflection. We've had many experiences in this church, right? I've been in this situation somewhat longer than you. And you've had quite a number of very profound, interesting experiences, right?
In the very short time that I've been in the church, yes.
Yes. How long have you been in the church now, Martin?
Since 2015.
2015. 7 is a good number.
Yeah.
Huh? It's a very good number. Mine changes every year. But it's somewhere between 35 and 37. I can't remember. Anyway, I guess I can work it out. It's about 35 years at least. And when I think of my experiences, and that was the question, how do you handle it? How can you handle it? How many times have I been before the Sanhedrin? Numerous times, right?
Well, you were in the last 2 years. Twice.
In the last 2 years, twice, yes. The Lord is very good to me. Prior to that, a number of times before the Sanhedrin, I've been called onto carpets, and I have been addressed in ways which I would not consider exactly brotherly kindness. So, yeah, I've had these experiences. And there were times when you think like Jeremiah, I'm not going to speak in this name anymore. And then, but the word was a fire in my heart and I could not. And I think back on the times when these things happened. And when you come into contact with blatant apostasy. Now, I had the privilege of being on some committees, and I've told many of these stories, but let's just deal with a different aspect. There in my stories, I told what happened, but I didn't talk about the personalities. Now, we don't want to mention any names, but we want to show that in every echelon, there are people that sound like Babylonians. And there are people in every echelon that act like Babylonians. And maybe there are people in every echelon that are Babylonians. And you have to deal with it, right?
Yes.
Now, when I was called to faith and science meetings, I met that whole plethora. And I was also very closely associated with the entire hierarchy and leadership of the church. And I find some of it very troubling. And some of it very, not only troubling, but extremely disturbing. So you're sitting there in one of these meetings, and someone is giving a speech which is so blatantly apostate that you cannot believe that that can come out of the mouth of a believer. Believes nothing about present truth, but nothing. Doesn't believe in a literal creation, doesn't believe that Jesus performed miracles, doesn't believe that anything happened that is of a supernatural nature in the Bible. Everything is naturalistic, believes this world is millions and millions of years old, and that anybody who doesn't go along with that line of thinking is a moron. And you're sitting next to leaders. And I'm sitting amongst one of the Biblical Research Institute people sitting next to me. And I'm listening to this talk, and I'm still relatively new to all of this. And I am stunned. I'm absolutely stunned. I can't believe what I am hearing. This cannot be true, not in this church. And eventually this individual there in the front starts sprouting pantheistic ideas, but so blatant. And these are higher people. I mean, these are deans in our theological institutes and in our medical institutes. And they're talking this kind of talk. This is pure Babylonian. This is what you would expect at the worst level in a secular university that has the professors all in the realms of atheism. And this is coming. So I tap this member of the Biblical Research Institute, and I say to him, but that's pantheism. He looks at me, he says, no, it's not pantheism. It's panentheism. And he keeps chatting with his friend. Not phased at all. So I think to myself, this is very strange. He's not phased. I'm so agitated I can explode. He's perfectly calm. And he's not even listening properly. He's chatting away about whatever. It doesn't bother him at all. Now, my feeling is, what's this man doing in our ranks? He's a Babylonian. He should go. He has no right to call himself a Seventh-day Adventist talking like this. But there's no action taken against him. There's no action whatsoever. There's no consequences to what he's preaching. Now, would that surprise you, Martin?
Yes. Of course, because when you come into the church and you've just learned all these truths, this does not fit.
How does this person who's preaching in the front there fit into a leadership position within this church? And why are the members, even of the Biblical Research Institute, not fazed? And I haven't read any articles against these people or anything of that nature, but preach present truth. And they will pick up their pens and they will lambaste you from one side of the planet to the other.
Unfortunately, you see, that's the truth. Because it's happened.
It happened. It's my experience.
Your experience, my experience, and especially across the past 2 years.
Yes. And then they put me into a subcommittee with another gentleman who also didn't believe in a 6-day creation, didn't believe in miracles. And this was someone who had a very high position at one of our universities. In fact, at one stage, he had the highest position at that university that you can possibly have within a university. And I sat in a subcommittee with this man. And I looked him through and thought to myself, what is this individual doing in the church? What's he doing there? He's sprouting all of this nonsense that is not part of the Bible or the spirit of prophecy. And I was still a young, fiery individual at that stage. Now I'm an old, fiery individual. And I thought, I will try and see if I can get a reaction from him. So I said some things like, anybody who believes what he believes must be an idiot. Especially if he belongs to this church. He should be He should be out there in the world. What's he doing in this church? Such a person doesn't belong here. It must be, either...
It must be out there that he can be evangelized again.
Yes,
To get
he
them
shouldn't be in the church. And I started saying some things of that nature. Do you think he was fazed?
Yeah.
No.
Cool and calm.
He didn't care at all. He was cool, calm, and collected. He was perinde e cadaver, like a corpse. Like a corpse. Totally impermeable to anything that I said. And I looked at his eyes and they were ice cold, and I thought, I would expect a Jesuit to look like this. And I thought to myself, I wonder whether this person is a Jesuit. What is this Babylonian doing in the church? And why is the church not doing anything against this individual? That's how I felt. And I thought I was alone. And I was totally devastated. And then, there were a couple of 100 people there, and 100 scientists. And then one day I got a tap on the shoulder, and a meek and mild little gentleman that nobody would probably notice within those ranks tapped me on the shoulder and said, would you like to attend a little private meeting? And I said, okay, what's it about? He said, no, we just want to chat a little bit. Would you come to room so-and-so at such and such a time? So I went. And there sat about, I don't know how many, I can't remember. There were 15, 20 people. And they were all scientists and people within the church. And I looked them through. I didn't know any of them. I didn't know who they were or whatever. And I just walked into this atmosphere which was the exact opposite of what I had experienced before. These people were so concerned about what was happening that they were literally weeping. Literally weeping. And I thought to myself, well, what's going on here? And then they said, we're on a terrible state. We have a terrible situation on our hands. We need to pray for this church, and we need to pray for these people. And they went on their knees and they prayed. And you walk out of there, Martin, and what do you think you feel?
Empathy.
All right? And you realize it's not all bad. Now, were these people that were in that room that were also prominent people in their fields, were they the most vocal in those meetings?
No.
No. I didn't even know them, right? Now, at one stage, I was working with some of the people high up in general conference organizations like geoscience. And there I met people that I went out into the field with and that we discussed issues with. And I spent 6 weeks with them. 6 weeks. And there were two in particular that I remember. And they were elderly. Now, Martin, if I had to look at them today and say, were they a house on fire? I would say no. They were quiet people. Were they great orators? Could they, captivate an audience with their talk? No. They were anything but. They were just so down to earth. And I went into the field with them on different occasions. And the one would speak, and he'd speak so dryly. And he would say, and he would explain something, and he would carry on like this. But you know what? After a while, you realize what these people were about. They were so full of faith. They were such godly people. that they put me to shame. And I still remember the one was quite elderly, and we walked up a mountain, a very high mountain, and he was walking slowly. And I thought to myself, I'll put a little bit of fire under you. Just get on with it. What's the matter with all of these people? Why are they like this? But you know what? He never, ever stopped. And everybody else was young and was going up that mountain, and then he'd get way behind or whatever, and then they were puffing and huffing, and he would go by at his same pace and carry on. And it was amazing. But he had such deep faith. And these people made such an impression on me. And these were the leaders of that institute. Yeah. Today, I don't know what that institute looks like. I haven't had any dealings with the current people. But they made a tremendous impression upon me. And they were not invited to any of those meetings. Well, because they said that they were retired. But the apostate ones that were retired, they were there. And it seemed so biased to me. So Martin, I've met Babylonians in this church. And I've seen the acceptance of the Babylonians in this church. And it freaked me out. And then I met the others. And so we could go through the names and through the lists of all of these people. When I started preaching present truth, then things got a little bit uncomfortable. Because there are those that are in very close connection with Babylonian institutes. We spoke about ecumenism and all of those issues. And it was very uncomfortable for some if I would say who Babylon was. The fallen Protestant churches, the papacy, mention it by name, and the dragon religions, everything to do with spiritism. That's Babylon. And if you then specify present truth, the mark of the beast, why Babylon has fallen, that becomes very uncomfortable. And then especially if you say that they belong to secret societies, many of these people, then the wheels come off. And they will tell you to stop speaking about these things. And that's exactly what happened to Jeremiah. Present truth wasn't popular, right?
A troubler of Israel.
You're a troubler of Israel. And especially when I started speaking about Bible translations. And then you were banned, and then you were unbanned, and then you were in on the carpet. And I dealt with the top echelon. I mean, division presidents, right? A number of them. Now, most of them that I dealt with when it came to these conflict issues, they were obviously calling me on the carpet to reprimand me. So do you think they were, very brotherly inclined towards me?
No, definitely not.
Definitely not, right? And I sat in some of those meetings, and the way in which they talked, and the way in which they addressed the issues, and the accusations that they made, and the distortions that they threw at me, and the blatant lies that they tried to pin on me, and the way in which they tried to do that, I would not expect such treatment from the worst of the secular universities in the world, let alone God's people. So this thoroughly shocked me that God's leaders could be of such a nature. And many of them were responsible for bringing blatant Babylonian teachings and apostasy into the church. And the members of the church were appalled at what some of these people were doing. And then you want to write off that entire leadership. That's where you get to. And then after the meeting, you sit in an office, and somebody comes in and starts talking to you. And they're high up in that very organization. And you realize they think exactly like you do.
Yeah, the opposite of the other one.
The opposite of their attitude within the same leadership organization. And the rest of the people, the staff, they're also not on that bandwagon. They are also normal people that have the same aspirations as you have. And some of them, came into the truth because of some of my lectures, for example. So there you meet these people and you think to yourself, no, this is a discordance in my brain. I can't handle this. And you realize that there are people in the highest echelons that are weeping and crying for what is happening. Now, one of the issues we spoke about last time was the Bible translations, right? So I was banned, I was called into meetings by the higher echelons, and the Biblical Research Institute. They came down on me like a ton of bricks. So I have considerable correspondence with them. And you would think now, why do they think so differently? And I would write them letters and I would show them. You know, Martin, that there are so many people that are involved in this Bible translation issue. You know how many books have been written on the issue?
Yeah, hundreds.
It's unbelievable. And many of those books come out of Adventist ranks, right? And they're very powerful books. You've seen some of them.
Yeah.
You've read some of them. Now, if you take the rest of the Protestant world, there are Protestants that feel so strongly about this issue. And they've written so many books. I mean, I've got a whole shelf full of them. And read them and internalized them. And their arguments are so profound.
It's unchallengeable. You cannot challenge that argument.
In my opinion, at least, it's virtually impossible to challenge those arguments. And you know what? It comes right from the beginning, even in the time when the King James was written, and the times thereafter when Westcott and Hort came out with their writings. Dean Bergen, for example. I mean, the things that he wrote in support of the received text and the King James Version were absolutely profound. But the modern theological seminaries, and of course the Catholic Church and its universities, they want to sweep that under the rug. And I would write and I would give all of these statements. They would ignore it flat. It's like they don't exist. And I would think, why are they so impervious to looking at evidence for the alternative view? Why do they run with the mainstream Babylonian thinking when there is all this evidence? And in one occasion, I gave a lot of evidence from certain manuscripts, what they said, etc., etc. And I got this evidence from the theological committee of the Schlachter Bible. Now, the Schlachter Bible is a German Bible that was put together based on the received text, because these people believed that the received text is the original text and should be given prominence again. Now, that committee consists of top theologians. And I would give the evidence of these top theologians and they would just brush it aside. Didn't exist. They wouldn't even answer the questions. So eventually I got to the point and I said, what's the point of talking with you? You don't even answer my questions. Do you still believe, like I said last time, do you still believe that the Pope is the Antichrist and that we have an enemy in the world? Do you still believe present truth? And do you believe that the spirit of prophecy is binding or not? And I received an answer. We don't have to answer those questions. You don't have to answer those questions? Or are you averse to answering them because maybe you're sitting in ecumenical councils and they're uncomfortable questions? And so I wrote back and says, well, then neither do I have to answer your questions anymore, so our discussion is over. Now you would think that you could put that whole group into a category. You can't.
Yep.
Because I was sitting at one of these meetings and a member came to me privately. And we had a discussion for a number of hours. And I realized, you know what? At every level, there are people that believe and stand for righteousness. Some of them are just more timid to speak openly.
That's it. And also, sometimes, I know you've mentioned, at first somebody is against and wants to fight it.
Yes.
But after some good study on the subject, they come around and they say,
Yes.
it's
There was one conference president in Germany. Let's not mention names. He's one of the most gentle people that I've ever met in my life. The kindest, sweetest man. And, I had a great affinity to him. He was really a gentle person. But when I started speaking about Bible translations, he said to me, you know what? I haven't been trained like that, and I think now you've really lost the plot. So I cannot support you any longer. But a couple of months later, he wrote to me and he says, I studied this thing through now. And I've come to the conclusion that there really is a big problem here. And so do you write everybody off just because they don't see it at that moment or don't want to accept it? Or, if somebody could show me on paper and show me from the spirit of prophecy that I'm wrong, I would recant immediately. But unfortunately, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy are not on the wavelength of the modern theological world.
The more you study it, the more you get grounded in that truth.
Yes, the more you study it, the more you get grounded. So this is an issue. So at every single level, whether it be the leadership in the church, I mean, if you think about the leadership in Germany that banned me and believe they have a legitimate reason, which they don't, because what they're doing is totally unbiblical. But be that as it may, does that mean all the leaders are like that? I gave a lecture series in Germany, outside the church because I'm banned within the church. And there were leaders that had the courage to come onto the stage and show solidarity. So you cannot paint everyone within this church with the same brush. God has his people. There are Nicodemuses in the Sanhedrin. But we cannot deny that there are Babylonian inroads in the church. Now, this event where this German representative and vice chairman of an ecumenical committee bowed down within this Roman Catholic Church, in fact, the very one that was responsible for my banning, in a sense, that caused quite a stir. And people are asking, do we stay in the church, considering that this is happening in the church? So my answer is, I've met them. I've met both sides of them within leadership. I've met both sides of them within the scientific community. I've met both sides of them within the medical community. I've met both sides of them within the normal church membership community. It's at every level, Martin.
That's it.
So what will save this church?
God will save this church.
And we need a shaking, right?
Yes.
We need a shaking. Now, when people come to me and they say, and they're from the division, and they say to me, you may not preach that the Pope is the Antichrist. If people come and they write articles, public articles, condemning what I say and saying that the papacy has changed, it is no longer what it was in the Middle Ages, when the spirit of prophecy says Rome never changes, then do I leave the church because there is a person that writes that, even if he is a union president?
No.
No. Have you had experiences like this in your short tenure in the church?
Oh, definitely. I've brought up concerns and with thinking especially about spiritual formation and books that were training material that had secular, not even Adventist professors as authors from secular universities, and that's training material and blatantly spiritual formation in that books as training material. And I brought these things up with training directors, and
you were well received. They said, well, we never saw this. We're going to get rid of it immediately, right?
Yeah, well.
Did they do that?
Unfortunately, it's still on.
Okay, so that didn't happen. So do we have Babylonian thinking in the church?
Definitely. My wife and I were involved with an evangelistic organization, and we had to go from different churches all over provinces and so on. And there we quite literally learned what you've explained, that there's different types of people, both sides in each church.
And this is just the way it is.
But we didn't leave because of this.
And some teachers and preachers and prominent people within the church in high up leadership capacity will say, you dare not say that the other institutions and churches comprise Babylon. And that the deity that we serve is the exact same deity as you find in some of the other religious systems of the world. And the answer is, I am the Lord your God that took you out of Egypt. Yeah. It's a very specific deity. It's not a general deity. And this is a major problem. And we're going to have this problem until the shaking takes place. And some of the harshest people might become Paul.
Yeah.
And some of the most timid people might become Nicodemus.
Mm-hmm. And there will also be probably some bright stars that will go out.
Correct. In fact, we read that in the spirit of prophecy. And many a star that is not now even noticed will be noticed when it becomes very dark. And these will shine. So don't lose courage within this church. The question is this the final message, the final present truth-bearing organization in the world?
Yes.
Can you call any level of leadership or any level within the church Babylon?
No.
No. Is it possible that there are Babylonians in it?
Yes.
No, it's not only possible, it's an absolute fact.
That's it.
All right? Are some of them real Babylonians and others just influenced Babylonians?
Possible, yes.
So we're living amidst the Babylonians.
That's it.
Does that make me better than them?
No.
No, because I'm Laodicea.
That's it. We have to all strive to get better.
We all have a problem with character. But I can weep and I can cry for all the evil that is done in Israel. The Lord has pronounced a curse upon those who take from or add to the scripture. The great I Am has decided what shall constitute the rule of faith and doctrine, and he has designed that the Bible shall be a household book. The church that holds to the word of God is irreconcilably separated from Rome. Martin, does Rome not peddle Bibles?
Mm-hmm. And we are.
Do you ever see them peddling the received text Bibles?
No. They hate it.
They hate them. So which books do you want in your house? Roman Catholic approved Bibles or Bibles that are steeped in Protestant theology because they come from the manuscripts that God gave to the reformers? Which ones would you want?
Obviously, if I want present truth.
Protestants were once thus apart from this great church of apostasy. They have approached more nearly to her and are still in the path of reconciliation to the Church of Rome. Do we have people in our own ranks that think they must hobnob it and bow down to idols in Roman Catholic institutes?
Yes, and
Yes.
they will be popping up
More and more.
more and more.
Do I leave the church because of them?
No, I think God is making it prominent that they can be exposed.
Aha, all right. And then this statement, Rome never changes. So they can write articles as much as they like, and they can belong to divisions, they can be union presidents, they can belong to the Religious Liberty Organization and write articles in favor of these things, and they can even give gold medals to the Pope. Do I leave the church because leaders in this church give gold medals to the Pope?
No, because the worst darkness is sometimes an opportunity to bring the light out.
There's a statement in the Spirit of Prophecy where it says that God permits apostasy to come into the church to wake up God's people.
That's what it has to do. Wake up.
And the more blatant it becomes, the more sure it will be that people will wake up.
That's it.
So Rome never changes. Her principles have not altered in the least. She has not lessened the breach between herself and Protestants. They have done all the advancing. The Protestants, that is. But what does this argue for the Protestantism of this day? It is the rejection of Bible truth which makes men approach to infidelity. It is a backsliding church that lessens the distance between itself and the papacy. So when you hear leaders doing these things, they are backsliding. So what should we do?
Pray for them.
Pray for them. That's all you can do. Do I leave the church because of them?
No.
No, because this church doesn't have a top-down structure. It has a bottom-up structure.
Yes.
So their apostasy does not become my apostasy. I don't have a corporate apostasy because of certain individuals within the church. So my appeal would be, stay in the church. This is the remnant. Then said Jesus unto the 12, John 6:67, and they were confronted with present truth. Will you also go away? Because when they heard present truth, they turned and they left. And Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life. This is our attitude. What other church preaches the three angels' messages, Martin?
None.
What other church has a universal distribution?
That's a bit important thing, because if you splinter off from this remnant church, you won't have that voice to reach everybody.
You know, there's a hymn that says, and though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler still. The Seventh-day Adventist Church is not Babylon. Those who assert that the Seventh-day Adventist churches constitute Babylon or any part of Babylon may better stay at home. Let them stop and consider what is the message to be proclaimed at this time. Present truth. In place of working with divine agencies to prepare a people to stand in the day of the Lord, they have taken their stand with him who is an accuser of the brethren, who accuses them before God day and night. Satanic agencies have been moved from beneath, and they have inspired men to unite in a confederacy of evil, that they may perplex, harass, and cause the people of God great distress. The whole world is to be stirred with enmity against Seventh-day Adventists, because they will not yield homage to the papacy. By honoring Sunday, let me just stop there, Martin. Seventh-day Adventists do not yield homage to the papacy. So those that yield homage to the papacy within our ranks Can they be called Seventh-day Adventists at this stage?
No.
No, they're not Seventh-day Adventists. So that puts that one to rest, right? By honoring Sunday, the institution of this anti-Christian power, it is the purpose of Satan to cause them to be blotted from the earth in order that his supremacy of the world may not be disputed. So within this church, there are Seventh-day Adventists.
Yes.
There is but one church in the world who are at the present time standing in the breach and making up the hedge, building up the old waste places. And for any man to call the attention of the world and other churches to this church, denouncing her as Babylon, is to do a work in harmony with him who is the accuser of the brethren. The whole world is filled with hatred of those who proclaim the binding claims of the law of God. And the church who are loyal to Jehovah must engage in no ordinary conflict. Those who have any realization of what this warfare means will not turn their weapons against the church militant, but with all their power will wrestle with the people of God against the confederacy of evil. So I cannot denounce the whole church as evil.
No.
But when I find evil, must I lift up my voice like a trumpet and tell the house of Jacob her sins?
Yes.
That's what the Bible says.
That's it. And you have the authority in the body to do something.
It's easy to take this and to quote it and say you're not allowed to attack the church at all.
Exactly.
What did Jeremiah do? Huh? Did he send them letters and tell them? How did they treat him?
Not very kindly.
Not very kindly. So we have a duty to tell the house of Jacob her sins. But we have no right to call the whole body Babylon.
Yeah.
We have no right to do that. The Christian world will learn what Romanism really is when it is too late to escape the snare. So Martin, when I see these people rubbing shoulders, it's like a mouse fiddling with a trap. I want to tell them, come out, get away there, run for your life. She is silently growing in power. Her doctrines are exerting their influence in legislative halls, in the churches, and in the hearts of men. Do we see that happening?
Yep.
Throughout the land, she is piling up her lofty and massive structures, in the secret recesses of which her former persecutions will be repeated. She is stealthily and unsuspectedly strengthening her forces to further her own ends when the time comes for her to strike. All she desires is vantage ground, and this is soon to be given her. In the near future, we will see and shall feel what the purpose of the Roman element is. Whoever shall believe and obey the word of God will thereby incur reproach and persecution. Is Rome climbing on the medical bandwagon as the right arm of her power?
It is the driving force behind this whole thing.
And those mice that sniff at that cheese and think that it is a tasty morsel will find that their nose might be entrapped very soon.
Yeah.
So the bottom line is, Martin, there are Babylonians amongst us. There are Babylonian doctrines being sold as tasty wine. But there is a remnant that believes the three angels' messages, that loves the present truth, and that is prepared to preach it at all costs. Would you concur with that?
I want to be part of that, and I believe we have to stand.
Therefore, let us stand.
That's it.
And if there are people in high places that do not have the same philosophy, I shouldn't make that my problem. That is their problem.
And God's problem.
And God's problem. And we are in this church because it preaches present truth. And as long as there is breath, and as long as there are people that believe the present truth, this remains the remnant.
Amen.
May God bless us, and may God bless this church. And may God wake up that desire to share present truth with the world, no matter what the cost, even if the cost is from within. We have more to fear from within than from without. But that should not deter us. That does not make this church Babylon. This is the final remnant with the final message to the world. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we are living in such troublous times, and the church is in such a turmoil that it appears to topple and fall. But it will not, because it has a final message to bear. And behind that message stands the God of the universe and millions and billions of angels. Open the eyes that we may see the hosts of God behind this message, and help us to preach it with a power that will shake this world. May it swell into a loud cry, and may many accept it. In Jesus' name, amen.